Oh, folks, it's such a great pleasure to have you tuned in today to the Paul Leslie Hour. We're tickled to be welcoming back for a second time Nashville Songwriter Hall of Fame inductee and hit record producer Buddy Cannon. Real quick, we need your help. Can you keep the show rolling? Go to www.thepaulleslie.com/support. Pull the lever. Send the support. We need you, and thank you for it. Take it away, Paul. Now, quick, go.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to present a returning guest. We are joined by songwriter and record producer Buddy Cannon. Thank you so much for joining us. To tell all the listeners and viewers out there, Buddy Cannon has recently been inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, and some of the songs that he's written, they've been recorded by Willie Nelson, Vern Gosdin, the Oak Ridge Boys, Mel Tillis, Alison Krauss, George Strait, Billy Ray Cyrus, Craig Morgan, Sammy Kershaw. He has a long and storied career. He's produced Kenny Chesney, Willie Nelson. It's a great pleasure to have you on here.
Hey, it's good to be back with you, Paul.
An honor to talk to you. So, how has the morning been going so far?
Today?
Yeah.
Oh, I got up and a little earlier than usual, but not too bad. I got some workers coming over here in a little while to do some stuff outside. I hope they don't get too noisy.
I hope not. So, how this being inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, that's a recent thing. How did you find out that was going to happen?
Well, I found out about maybe a month and a half or 2 months before the announcement that I was that my name was in the running. Like in a group of 5 or 6 people who were candidates to be inducted. I got a call from Mark Ford, who heads up the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, and he told me that, and he said, "I'll get back to you in 8 or 10 days and let you know what happens." And I was thrilled is an understatement for sure. And then when I got the call a few days later, he said, "Yep, you're in." So it's really an honor to be in there with all my heroes and a lot of friends. It was a big night for us. We all my family came, my kids and my grandkids, and we were all sitting pretty close together. And somebody came up to me and told me there were more cannons there than there were in the Civil War. It was a fun night, though. It was a lot of fun.
So the name Buddy Cannon, you're alongside, I mean, going back to people like Hank Williams, but also some people you've written with, Dean Dillon, Hank Cochran, all these great songwriters. How does that feel?
It feels great. I mean, obviously I never got to know Hank Williams, but my earliest memories that I have are listening to Hank Williams on the old battery radio out in the country, and I remember we lived in a house that didn't have indoor plumbing, had an outhouse for a toilet and no electricity outside, and we had a well that we had to get our water from, and it had round tile things that go down in the ground, and you had to drop a well bucket down into the ground. I don't know, it seemed like all the way to China. It was probably 50, 75 feet down. And that thing, I learned, I mean, I'm a little kid, and I learned, that was my first experience with reverb, because I used to go over to that thing and stick my head into it and talk and sing, and I could hear that echo coming up out of the ground. And I would sit there and sing Lovesick Blues and Kalijah and all them Hank Williams songs. It was kind of crazy.
Well, the last time we did an interview, we didn't have a chance to go into this, but I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about your early times. You're from Lexington, Tennessee, correct?
Right. It's over about 20 miles east of Jackson, Tennessee.
Can you tell us about your parents? What were they like?
But my mom and dad were divorced when I was, I don't know, 3 years old maybe. And my dad left, and there was, he was an alcoholic, and he and my mom split up, and he was a drifter, and I don't remember. I remember vaguely. I have one vague memory of him coming around during Christmas time when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And then the first time I ever remember having a conversation with him, I was 16, and I was raised by my mother and my grandmother. And at that time, I had two sisters, Judy and Joan, and we all lived together, and without a male figure in the house. I had an uncle who was a musician that lived up the road about a quarter mile or so, and he's the one who nurtured my music. When he saw I was kind of getting the hang of it and had a natural ability. He was great. He was a great musician, and he saw that I had some kind of natural thing for it, and he started taking me with him wherever he went. If his guitar was in the car, I was in there too. And I've still got his old guitar over here somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 1957 Fender Stratocaster.
I'm hoping you can tell us about your experience. Not a lot of people know this name, but well, some do. I shouldn't say that. Tell us about your experience with the great Bob Luman playing in his band.
After I got out of high school, my wife, my wife, my girlfriend at the time, and her family had moved from Lexington, Tennessee, up to Chicago, to the Chicago area. And after a few months, I decided I wanted to go visit her. And I got on a train in Jackson and went to Chicago, and I never came back. Basically, I stayed up there, and I got a few gigs playing clubs around the Chicago area. One of them, we had the last club gig I had up there was a band who was all the musicians and singers in the band were as good as anybody in Nashville. And we played this club called the Lake and Park Inn. And they would book Nashville artists in every Saturday, and that's where I first met Bob. They booked him to come in and play on a Saturday, and he didn't have a band at the time, so our band learned all of his songs, and we played behind him. So, and that was fun. Bob was awesome, man. He was a great entertainer, even with a band he'd never played with before. He just commanded the house. And when I decided to make the move to Nashville, there was another guy that I played with at the same club in Chicago named Johnny Carver. And Johnny and I had gotten to be really good friends, but I decided to move to Nashville. And the first day that I was here, I called Johnny Carver and said, "Hey, John, I've made the move. I'm in town, and just wanted to let you know. And if you hear of anybody needing a bass player, I'd appreciate if you put my name in the hat." He said, "Funny that you called." He said, they were both on Epic Records at the time. He said, "I ran into Bob Luman over at the record label today. And he told me his bass player had quit, and he's got gigs this weekend, and he needs somebody to go play bass with him." And he said, "Let me give him a call." So he called Bob, then he called me back and he said, "Can you be at Bob's house tonight at 7 o'clock out in Hendersonville?" And so they gave me the address, and I went out and met with Bob and his guitar player, Steve Smith. And we played 3 or 4 songs. I knew them all, you know. I was playing bass. And he hired me on the spot. And the next night, he had a brand new record that I'd never heard before. It's called When You Say Love. And the next night, I was standing on stage at the Ryman playing the Opry, playing that song that I really didn't know very well. And I was really nervous. But Bob was, gosh, he was so good. I watch YouTube videos of him all the time, and I'm amazed at what a great singer he really was. You know, back then there was no tuning vocals, and you know, the way the guy sang is what you heard. It's what you got, you know. And Bob just never had any trouble singing. It was just so natural with him. And he, you know, he did impersonations in his show, and he'd do Walter Brennan and little Jimmy Dickens and Hank Snow and all them guys. And he just tore the house up wherever we went. At the Opry, the biggest stars didn't want to follow him. He was so good. So he was great. I love him. I think about him multiple times every day. He died when he was 41 years old.
That was in 78, right?
78, yeah.
I definitely recommend anybody out there, if they want to go on YouTube or look up on Apple Music or whatever, Bob Luman. There's just really, really some incredible recordings that were made.
Yeah, his first, you know, when he first got started, he was during the time of the Elvis surge, you know, in the late 50s, I guess, and he was doing rockabilly. I mean, he's had some of the greatest musicians that ever picked up a guitar in his band. He had James Burton in the beginning. James Burton was his first guitar player. Joe Osborne, who played bass on so many big hit records. Billy Sanford, who's another Nashville session guy who had a great career. The guy that I was playing, that was there when I was in the band, Steve Smith, one of the best guitar players I've ever heard. Roy Buchanan was in his band. It's crazy. I mean, there was some sort of magnetism that pulled all these great players toward him. I don't know. It's unexplainable to me.
Can you remember the first song that you ever wrote?
You know, I was thinking about that the other day. I can remember a little bit of it, but it was it just goes to show you how your imagination can write the song, you know, because the first song I wrote was called Hobo Blues. And I never seen a hobo, never been on a train, hardly ever seen a train, you know. I had this image in my head of a hobo on a freight train. And I mean, you know, the song wasn't very good, but it was the first one I wrote. I was probably about 11 or 12.
Well, tell us about the experience you had with writing for Mel Tillis.
You know, I started really writing songs when I was playing with Bob Luman, and it was more out of boredom than anything else. We'd be on those cross country bus rides and just started messing around with songs and wrote a few. And you know, I stayed with Bob from 1972 to 1975. And then I decided for different reasons that I wanted to get off the road right then. And I took a club gig in town here. And we had a piano player in our band named Gene Dunlap from Louisiana. And Gene and we'd been messing around writing songs, and a guy who was running Mel's publishing company was a friend of mine I'd met in Chicago. It's crazy how all this circles around. But I went out to Fred Carter's studio with Gene and put down a little demo just for fun of some of the things we had written. And I played them for my buddy Jimmy Darrell, who had just gone to work for Mel in his publishing company. I just, I wasn't pitching them. I just played them for him. So I don't know why I did. I just did. And I was at a few nights later, I was playing my club gig here in town, and a waitress came up to me. I was on stage, and the waitress came up and she said, "You've got a telephone call. Kind of weird." And I said, "Well, who is it?" She said, "Well, he says he's Mel Tillis." And it was the night after Mel had won the CMA Entertainer of the Year. So Mel's name was on everybody's tongue, And I thought somebody was messing with me, but I went over and took the call, and he said, "Hey, buddy, this is Mel Tillis." I said, "Yeah, right," And he finally, after a few minutes, I believed it was Mel, And he said, "Hey, Hoss," he said, "I just cut one of your songs." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I'd written a song called Golden Nugget Gambling Casino about the Golden Nugget in Las Vegas." And he said, "I just cut it and it's good." And he said, "Get your ass down here to my office and we're going to listen to it." So I knew where his office was, and I finished up what I was doing there at the gig and drove down to Mel's office. And sure enough, man, Mel and Jimmy Darrell, my buddy from Chicago, were in there, and Mel had been in the studio, and he had cut my song. And we stayed in there. He cut my song and one other one. I forgot what it was. But we stayed there. That would have been about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And we stayed there until the sun came up the next morning, listening to my song over and over. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing today?" I said, "Well, no plans." He said, "Well, I'm recording again at 2 o'clock over at RCA." He said, "Come by and hang out with me." I said, "All right, I will." So I went over to the studio. He did 3 songs, and all 3 of them were songs off of my demo. So my first cuts were, I got 4 at one time, and he signed me to a publishing deal, and I stayed with him until he sold his companies, about 12 years. He was awesome. And I got to play in his band. He had the big band with all the fiddles. And when I was playing in his band, there was either 12 or 13 people on stage. It was big and it was fun. We had a great time.
How would you describe Mel Tillis the Man?
He was funny, humorous. He loved to laugh. He loved to make other people laugh. He was an incredible songwriter. He had a big heart. He was a great guy, and I miss him every day. I'm so honored to have had that experience. So, the only reason that he signed me was because he liked what I was doing. It wasn't because he was doing me a favor, and it was very encouraging, and it made me write, and he would show me when I'd bring a song in and, had a flaw in it, or he would just point it out to me. And, he basically taught me how to write just by his criticism of what I was bringing in. But I saw him do some really, really heart things for people that nobody ever heard about,
Well, there's another really, really great voice that you start listening to Vern Gosdin, and before you know it, an hour has passed, and you still want to listen to more. You had a long association with Vern Gosdin. Tell us about working with him.
Well, I love Vern singing. A funny thing was that I found out later that just a year before I was in Chicago, Vern was in Chicago running a bar. And it's funny how that everything connected, or a lot of things connected to my musical life ran through Chicago, But I was a big Vern fan. I loved those records he did on Elektra. And I found out I was living out in Kingston Springs, Tennessee, which is a little community about 20 miles west of Nashville. And I knew that Vern was getting ready to record. I'd heard that on the street. And I found out, one of my neighbors told me, hey, that guy Vern Gosden just moved into a duplex up here. And it was literally, I could walk there in 3 or 4 minutes from my house. And I said, holy cow, I know he's cutting. And so the next morning on my way into the office, I decided I'm just going to stop and introduce myself. And because I had just written a song called Dream of Me. And we wrote it hoping Don Williams would cut it. But I thought, man, that would be an awesome song for Vern, So I did. I left my house and drove up the hill to Vern's duplex. Got out of my car, knocked on the door, and Vern comes and opens the door, and there I'm standing face to face with him. And I introduced myself, told him I was a writer, and asked him if I could pitch him some songs. He said, oh, yeah, son. He said, bring me something out. I'll listen to it. I'm going to record pretty soon. And so that night, or that day, I made a cassette with about, 8 or 10 songs on it. And the next morning, on my way into town again, I stopped at Vern's house and I said, hey, I brought some songs if you want to listen to them. He said, yeah, come on in. So we, he had a cassette player there in his living room, and we played a little bit of all the songs, and Dream of Me was the last song on the cassette, and he was passing on everything, and he got to dream of me, and everything changed. Like I saw him come to life. And he said, son, play that again. And so, we played it again, and he said, gosh, he said, I got to cut that. And he said, can you get me a lyric sheet on it? And I said, yeah, I'll run into town and get one. And I did, and he cut it, and we started writing together, And he moved out of that duplex and built him a little house, but it was only a half mile from me. So he was at my house 3 or 4 nights a week, and me and him and my daughter Melanie, we would sit. She was about 12 or 13 at the time, and we would sit there, and he started showing her how to sing those harmonies that he did, those bluegrassy kind of harmonies. He told me, he said, son, you better listen to her close. He said, she got something in her voice. And it became a thing. Whenever he was in town off the road, we were sitting around the table at my house singing, me and him and Melanie, and we sung the chorus to George and Tammy's Golden Rings. We must have sung that thing 5,000 times sitting around my table. And he just loved to sit and sing. He would change the harmony parts up, said, try this, you do this and you do this. And it was just a thing. We did it all the time. And I don't have any video. I don't have any recordings of it. We just did it. I didn't see a need to record it because he was going to be back the next night, you know. So we just, I don't know, we hit it off and wrote some really good songs together. And I hear him on the radio. I listen to Willie's Roadhouse all the time, and I hear Vern singing songs he and I wrote all throughout the day. So other people like him as much as I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Vern Gosden was just special recording artist. There's one song, Vern Gosden has done it. A lot of people have done it. It's something that I'm not alone. I have a kind of obsession with this song. I don't know why.
Alone?
What's that?
A song called Alone?
No, not Alone. I was going to ask you about, you wrote it with Dean Dillon, Vern Gosden, Hank Cochran. I'm talking about Set 'Em Up Joe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people have cut that. And
Yeah.
tell me about that one.
You know, that was Vern got him a record deal with Columbia in the, I don't know, about 86, 87. And Hank Cochran was instrumental in helping him get that record deal. And Bob Montgomery was going to produce the record. And Bob wanted Vern to write, he wanted him to write the record. And so Vern and Max D. Barnes, who he'd been writing with for a long time, they wrote a bunch of things. Then Hank and Vern were going to write, and they wanted to pull Dean Dillon in. Vern said, let's bring Buddy in. So me, Vern, Hank, and Dean went up to Gatlinburg. Hank had a cabin up there on the Little Pigeon River. And we went up and spent 2 or 3 days or 4 days, I can't remember. But to write songs for Vern's record, and we wrote a bunch of songs. I mean, a bunch of them are on that album. Some of them are on the second album. But Set 'Em Up Joe we were sitting around the table in Hank's kitchen there. I think Dean spit out that first line, and the song just took off. You know, we wrote it so fast that it was just like a blur. You know, I remember Dean did write that vintage Victrola line. It just wrote itself, you know. And then, yeah, you know, honestly, I didn't think much about it. I didn't think it was all that great when we wrote it. And then when we got back to town, I went with Vern in to play the songs for Bob Montgomery, his producer. And when Set 'Em Up Joe came on, it was rough. I mean, it was Dean singing on, just us sitting around banging on guitars. And when Vern played that song for Bob jumped up out of his chair, and he obviously saw and heard something that I'd missed, you know. And he was cutting, I don't know, a few days later, and he cut it. I still wasn't that impressed with it, even after he cut it. But then we overdubbed that great steel guitar that Jim Vest played on it, and that dropped the whole thing. I could see the picture then, you know, and it was a big hit. I mean, I hear it 3 or 4 times a day on Willie's Roadhouse, and it's been cut several times.
Yeah. Randy Travis, Daryl Singletary, Jamie Johnson. A lot of people like that.
You know, the day Jamie was in Key West, Florida with his band down at Jimmy Buffett's studio working on a record. And I was in Nashville the day that Vern passed away. They announced it on the radio kind of early in the day. And my cell phone rang. It was Jamie. He said, "Hey, buddy, I just heard Vern just died." Mm. I said, "Oh, man." I knew he was sick, you know. But I said, "What are you doing?" He said, well, I'm down here in Key West working on this record. I said, why don't you Set 'Em Up Joe? He said, okay. And went in and cut it right then. And, you know, it was pretty cool.
I remember he says at the end of the recording, he says, there you go, Vern.
I'd forgotten about that. Yeah. I'm going to have to listen to it again now.
Well, what would you say? I mean, you've had some great songs that you've written. A lot of people know Give It Away that George Strait recorded. Could you pick a favorite song of yours that you've written that was recorded?
Oh, I mean, I'm proud of a lot of them. Really, really proud. You know, I would say maybe Dream of Me, just because I don't know, there's something infectious about the melody. From the birth of that song, there's been something swirling around with it, you know. And that's one of my favorites for sure. I wrote a song that Joe Stampley recorded called Whiskey Chasing, which I wrote that by myself, and that's one of my very favorites. I don't know if you're familiar with that one or not. It's not out.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
There's something I wanted to ask you about that I wish I had the first time, because you brought him up. I had the chance to interview Jimmy Bowen, and that you created quite a whirlwind. A lot of people checked that out. What did you learn from your time being around Jimmy Bowen?
Man, I was soaking it up. That very first session that when Mel Tillis called me and told me he recorded the first song of mine that he ever recorded, that was the producer on that was Jimmy Bowen, and he had just moved to Nashville from LA, or actually I think he had stopped in Arkansas and stayed there a while. I don't know what he was doing there, but anyway, he had just moved to Nashville. He and Mel knew each other from Bowen had produced Kenny Rogers' Ruby Don't Take Your Love to Town. So Mel and Bowen had a relationship. So anyway, Mel was recording and Bowen was his producer. And he let me hang. You know, I was a rookie. I was just learning. I didn't even know what I was trying to learn, you know. But I don't know, he just let me hang out and I don't know, it's hard to answer that question, you know. He didn't run me off, you know. And you know, hell, we were drinking and smoking pot and I mean, Bowen liked to smoke pot, and I liked to smoke pot back in those days, and Mel loved it too, you know. So it was one big pot fest, and you know, we got along, you know. A lot of people he's not one of the most popular guys that's ever been in Nashville, but I always tell people that all he ever did for me was cut me 2 #1 records. You know, on my songs. So you know, and he let me hang out whenever. He never told me, don't come in, you know. I probably annoyed the hell out of him, but he always let me hang out, you know. Did you say you interviewed Bowen?
Yeah, I did. I had tons of people. It was just in the course of a few weeks, people kept asking me, do you know Jimmy Bowen? Have you ever interviewed Jimmy Bowen? And finally, I think it was Tony Brown who put us in touch.
Yeah.
And he was fascinating to talk to.
Yeah, he's got a rich history.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about your daughters earlier, and we have a question from a great talent who also is the daughter of a great musician. This came from Amanda Colleen Williams. Her father, of course, was the late Kim Williams.
Well,
But I thought
well,
she's got a great question for you. She wanted to know, as a family man and father of two successful daughters in the music business, have you found balance over the years between work and home life?
uh, the last I quit drinking. I quit drinking and drugs in 1989. Prior to that, I had no balance at all. I'm amazed I could walk across the floor. But after that, after I put the alcohol out of my life, I started realizing the value of home and my kids, and I think I kind of found a way to enjoy the best of all of it, without either one interfering with the other. I'm proud of my daughters. Melanie is a great singer, and Marla is in my opinion, she's in the top 3 or 4 best songwriters in Nashville right now. And my older daughter, Michelle, she's not in the music business, but she's a very hardworking girl that she works in a law office and has a lot of people that rely on her.
Well, she had a second part of the question. She wanted to know, do you think that having daughters has shaped your artistry?
Well, to a degree, I think, those early songs when I was writing for Mel Tillis were pretty much, I was writing what my craziness was putting me through, and a lot of it had to do with my kids, my coming home drunk and things they would say to me in defense of their mom, so yeah, it spills over,
Well, thank you to Amanda Colleen Williams for those questions.
Hey, Amanda.
Yeah. There's something that I wanted to ask you about. You have been with Kenny Chesney. Once you started producing him, you've been his producer all this time. You want to talk about a phenomenon in the music business. Could you begin to explain what is the mystery or the magic of Kenny Chesney? Why do you think that so many people are such fans of his?
Well, he makes music they can relate to. He is he loves great songs. He's not a fan of mediocrity, as far as songs go. And it's I started with him, I think, in '96, first record we made, and I learned how to make better records by working with him. He says I taught him how to make records. It's I think it boils down to the fact that I respect him as much as he evidently respects me. We've never had a crossword, never, not one time. And when he got, I was working for Mercury Records back in around 1990 or so, and Kenny signed a publishing deal with Acuff Rose Publishing, which was, their office was directly across the street from my office. I could walk over there. All I had to do was wait for the cars to go by, And Kenny had come over with some of the pluggers, and they introduced him and said, "This is a guy we just signed, songwriter we just signed." And so I got to know him. We had a receptionist over there that Kenny was taken by, you know. So he would come over and hang out in the lobby and flirt with, her name was Molly. He would flirt with Molly every day. He'd be over there hanging out in the lobby, and he, you know, he'd play me a song every now and then. And one day he came in, and Molly came back there. She said, "Hey, Kenny Chesney's out there. He wants to talk to you." I said, "Well, send him in." So he comes in. He said, "Buddy," he said, "Hey, man," he said, "I just got me a record deal." I didn't even know he was trying to be an artist. I thought he was just a songwriter, you know. And at the time, Norro Wilson and I were producing Sammy Kershaw, which was the first artist I ever produced. It just happened that we had our first single was a hit, big hit, and we were putting singles out that they were one hit after another. You know, we were on about our third or fourth single, and then Kenny comes in and says he just got signed, and he loved our Sammy records, loved the way they sounded. He said, "I want you and Norro to produce my album." Well, I had been butting heads with the head of our record label that I worked at, and I wanted to produce more records, and I wasn't getting that chance, you know. And he told me not to come in. He had allowed me to do a George Jones album with Norro, only because George had called him up personally and asked him if we could. And he told me, he said, "I'm going to let you do this because it's George, but don't come back in here wanting to do another project that's not on the label." He didn't want me doing an outside project, but he wasn't letting me do any inside things. And the only one I had done was platinum album, you know. And so anyway, I had to tell Kenny I can't, you know, and that killed me because that was the next step that I could take, you know. So Kenny said, "Okay, man." So he went to Barry Beckett, and Beckett ended up doing his first album and his second album. And by that time, I had gotten fed up with my lack of progress at the record label, and I had quit. I had made me a publishing deal with Warner Chappell that gave me enough money I could live on without having that record company gig. So I've just quit that. And it'd been about 3 weeks, I guess, after I quit the label. I got a phone call from Renee Bell, who worked over at RCA BNA Records. And she said, "Hey, Kenny just called me, and he said he heard that you're not at the record label anymore. He said he wants to meet with you and talk about maybe y'all producing them now." So that's the way that went down. You know, me and Norro met with Kenny, and he said, "Can you do it now?" I said, yeah. So he basically waited 2 or 3 years, and until I was free, you know. And our first record we cut was called "She's Got It All," and it was I think it was his second number one. I think the last single that they put out that Barry had produced was number one, I believe. But that started it. And throughout these years, there's only one song he's put out as a single that I didn't have, you know, wasn't producer on. That's amazing. You know, I look back, I can't believe how fast the time has gone, and I can't believe how many songs we've recorded, and I can't believe how successful he's been. And he's such a smart guy, you know, on top of being a great human being. He is, I mean, everything, he sees a way to connect everything to something that will further where he is, you know. He does it without hurting people. I mean,
Right.
he's got guys who work for him inside his touring operation, guys he went to high school with.
Hmm.
You know, they've been with him throughout his life. You know, they made a pact back when they were in school that if either one of them ever got successful, they would take care of the rest of them.
Oh, nice. And talk about an incredible range. You know, you've got all types of songs that he's done. I think like just a great range as a singer.
Yeah, he's you know, he just loves great songs. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, people always call me or send me emails. What are you looking for? I'll say, all I know to tell them is I'm looking for something I've never heard before. You know, and it's a hard question to answer.
Hmm.
You know, I'm just looking for something great, and everybody's idea of what's great is different. It's all opinions, you know. So it just happens that what I think is good and great is pretty much the same thing that Kenny thinks is good or great. You know, our opinions on songs are intertwined.
You're tapping onto something that I've always wondered. I always wondered for a man like yourself, are you just getting bombarded all the time with people trying to get you to listen to something? Or, I mean, you know, listen to my song. Does that happen all the time?
Yeah, it does. You know, but that goes with the territory. You know, I listen to as much as I can, and it's impossible to listen to everything. You know, and you know there are reasons that producers who are songwriters, there are reasons that you hit a wall when you're trying to pitch them a song, because you know somebody might pitch you a song that's got a line in it that is that that I've got the same line in a song I wrote 10, 15 years ago. But if my song comes out after they've sent me their song, then they think I've stolen their song, you know.
Yeah.
And there are two instances where I've had to deal with a lawsuit where people thought that the a song I wrote was derived from their song, you know, and it's that ain't me, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's a problem, you know, and people don't understand. They think you just think you're too good to listen to their song. That's not it. It's a legal thing, you know, and it's very, very expensive to prove you didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't like that. That probably my worst 2 days as far as disappointing and wishing I was doing something else for a living were the 2 days that I found out I was being sued by two or three other songwriters who thought I had stolen their song. Yeah, it's pretty horrifying when someone accuses you of stealing something and you didn't, you know.
Yeah. No doubt. Well, do you have any memory of the duet that you all did, Kenny Chesney with Jimmy Buffett, of trying to reason with the hurricane season?
Yeah, you know, we cut the track here in Nashville, and it was just a matter of tracking down Jimmy Buffett, you know, and I think he actually ended up singing that singing his part in Hawaii in a hotel room. Mac McAnally, who is a great friend of ours, and Kenny's done a lot of his songs. He works for Buffett, plays in his band. And Mac kind of steered the ship to get Buffett on that song. And I'm pretty sure he cut it in a hotel room in Hawaii.
I just wanted to ask you, as a writer yourself, you did a couple of these albums with Willie Nelson of Frank Sinatra type material. In fact, a lot of Frank Sinatra songs. What do you think about that kind of music, the American Songbook?
Oh, man, I love that stuff. I mean, it's soothing. It's soothing. It makes you smile. Some of it makes you sad, like Cottage for Sale. That's on the latest album we did of Sinatra song. We did two Sinatra tribute things. Cottage for Sale is on the latter album, and that song, I've tried to get somebody to cut it for 20 years. And because it fits. I mean, it's one of the best all around songs. I mean, it's not just a old pop jazz song. I mean, the lyrics are country as anything. I mean, Hank Cochran could have written that song. I mean, it's a universal thing, I don't know, and getting to do those with Willie is he loves them. I mean, his whole life, he's getting ready to be 89 years old or something, and his whole life he's been singing those songs, and it's just natural as riding a bicycle to him, So we did the first time we ventured into that world as far as me and Willie working together was I don't know, about 5-6 years ago. We did an album of Gershwin songs.
Yeah.
And then we did the My Way album of Sinatra songs. And then a couple of years later, we decided to do a second Sinatra tribute, and we were actually nominated for a Grammy for the latest one, for That's Life, and we won a Grammy for each of those other two records that I mentioned. And I had to I called in my friend Matt Rawlings, who's a great, awesome musician and producer, arranger. But when Willie's Camp told me they wanted to do that Gershwin record, I said, hey, I love that stuff, but I said, I got to think of somebody to help me do that, because I want it to sound authentic. I don't want it to sound like my hillbilly butt trying to be pop, So I called Matt up and asked him if he wanted to help me do it. And it was a natural fit, because I love Matt's playing. I've worked with him on sessions before, and it just worked out. And so we did the Gershwin record, and when the Sinatra thing come up, I said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, So I called Matt again, we did that, and then the second Sinatra thing come around, and so this is the third album that we've done, me and him and Willie.
I love all of those albums. They're really just a delight to listen to.
Well, thank you. I knew we were going to talk this morning, and I haven't listened to That's Life in I don't know, probably 3 or 4 or 5 months. So I listened to it as I was having coffee this morning. It was fun. Goes by easy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, before we go, I want to say hello to a couple people who I think will be watching. Larry Bastian and Buzz Rabin, who I know are friends of yours.
Oh, yeah, I love those guys.
Great people and great writers, great all around. But my last question, speaking of these friends, You've written with so many great writers, Dean Dillon, Bill Anderson, the late Hank Cochran. You produced people like Willie Nelson, George Jones, Kenny Chesney, had your songs recorded by people who will go down in music history, you know? I mean, like all the names I put at the beginning, listed at the beginning. So my last question, and also I should say, newly inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. What is the best thing about being Buddy Cannon?
Oh gosh, getting up every morning and taking a deep breath, you know, and you know, talking to my phone rings a lot, and when I look at my caller ID, I'm blown away by the name that pops across it. You know, it's great that I've got so many friends. You know, my family, everybody is still healthy. You know, it's just I have no complaints. You know, and I just want to keep making music as long as somebody wants to work with me. You know, and I haven't been writing much lately, but I can feel the fire stuff, you know, and I'm getting ready to try to see if I can write something worth playing for somebody.
Well, Buddy Cannon, thank you so much for being generous and coming on here, answering all my questions.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's great talking to you. So live or going to be archived?
I'll edit it just a little and it'll be up, and people will be able to watch or listen whenever they want, 24/7.
Well, I really enjoyed listening to the Buzz Raven thing. The Buzz, and I mean, I love Buzz Raven songs. He's got a ton of songs that nobody's ever heard. When we signed him to Mel Tillis's company, right after I went there, I was a fan already, and so we signed Buzz over there, and it would take him a month to write a song. He worked that hard on them, you know? And there's a catalog of unrecorded songs over there that are just unbelievable.
And if anybody gets a chance, try and find his album that he came out with, Cross Country Cowboy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, great singer also, Buzz Raven.
Oh yeah. He's got a song that one of my favorite songs is the song that Ringo Starr recorded, the title of Ringo's country album called Bukus of Blues.
Yeah.
And I love that song. I've tried to get everybody to cut it too, but so far no luck. But I love that song.
Eventually someone will, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, Buddy Cannon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
Until next time.
Yeah, man. Enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it.
You know, the Paul Leslie Hour is made possible by people like you, listeners, viewers. Please go to thepaulleslie.com/support, and you'll know what to do when you're there. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who contributes. Video editing today by Kumar. Performance of The Entertainer intro song by John Primorano. And of course, this is your announcer speaking. See you next time on the Paul Leslie Hour.